I'm honestly happy to meet all of you, and I'm sincerely saying this. It's good to see young people such as you, because I work with old people all the time. So it's good to see high school students and speak to high school students. So if I may introduce myself, my name is Sinan Ertay, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Turkish Embassy here in Washington, D.C. Now, the first question that will pop into your mind is, what does a Deputy Chief of Mission do? Who is this guy? So the ambassador who runs the embassy, so he's in charge of the embassy. He represents the Republic of Turkey and the Turkish president here in the US. And I'm the number 2 in the embassy. So when the ambassador is somewhere back in Turkey or somewhere else, it's me who runs the embassy and does all the representation on behalf of the Republic of Turkey. So that is a Deputy Chief of Mission. And now, if I may briefly talk about myself, what a diplomat does in general. So a diplomat usually works for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In the US, it's the State Department. And in Turkey, to be able to become a diplomat, you have to pass an entrance exam, which is quite difficult, actually. You have to know a foreign language, which is usually English. Mine actually is German. My first foreign language is German, and then English. So you can take the exam with up to 2 foreign languages. You have to write an essay in Turkish, in German in my case, and in English. And you have to do a translation, Turkish, English translation, English, Turkish, and so forth. And then you have to take an oral exam where they ask you about history, international law, economics, and many other issues. And, should you succeed in that exam, you start off as an aspiring diplomat for a year, and then you work up the ladder. So I've been in the ministry for about 20 years now, and I've worked in our embassies in Tbilisi, which is in Georgia, east of Turkey. Then I also worked in our embassy in Berlin, since I speak German. I worked in our EU delegation, which means, since Turkey is a candidate country to the EU and a negotiating country, we have a permanent representation, although we're not a member in the EU yet, a permanent representation in Brussels at the EU, where we talk with the European Union authorities about our accession process. And I also worked in our embassy in Skopje, in now Northern Macedonia. They changed their name after I left. And now in the embassy in DC. So, should you want to become a diplomat at one time, be sure that you like to travel, right? This is really an essential issue. If you don't like traveling, being a diplomat would be horrible for you, I believe. Because every other year, every other couple of years, sometimes every 4 years, sometimes every 2 years, you're being posted somewhere else, which means you have to pack everything up, right? Get on a plane and move to another country and start all over, which is not easy because you get, it's just human nature, you get used to a place. And when you move to a totally different country, to a totally different city, totally different culture, you have to adapt yourself. First of all, you have to get to know the city. You have to get to know your surrounding. Where do I get my takeout food, right? Where are the dry cleaners? Where do I go for a run, for example? These are all things that you have to start from scratch when you move. So you should really think about if you really, should you consider in the future to become a diplomat, you really have to think about whether you like traveling and whether you like change or not. Because your life is in a state of constant change when you're a diplomat. The good thing is, when you look from the positive aspect, I mean, I like my job. That's why I do it, because you can start all over again after a few years, right? And I like the challenge of getting to know new places, adapting to the new place, making new friends, making new acquaintances. That's what I like about my job. I get to know people from all over the world, should they be from South America, Africa, Asia, Europe. And you really speak a common language with those people because they're also foreigners or foreign diplomats in the country where you work. So this is one of the driving forces of why I do this. What does it? Please, Sıtkı Bey and Demet Hanım, tell me if I, talk too much, or you can ask me questions. And I also honestly do not want to bore you bore you with my introduction, but rather I would have a short introduction, and I would like to hear your answers, and that would make it more interactive, which would be more fun for me as well. But if you allow me just a few short comments about what it entails to be a Turkish diplomat. Well, it's not easy to be a Turkish diplomat, to be honest, because we have many issues on our plate, many issues on our plate, ranging from currently the Eastern Mediterranean issues are difficulties in our relations with Greece, with Israel, for example. Turkey is located at a junction between Asia, Africa, and Europe. So anything that happens on those continents inevitably affects Turkey as well. So when we had, for example, the war in Syria, 3.5 million Syrians fled to Turkey, right? So a war in Syria shouldn't affect Turkey normally, but it does. Afghanistan, we had many refugees from Afghanistan as well. And we have good relations with Europe, for example. We have Russia as a kind of neighbor, not at the border, but they're just across north at the Black Sea. We have, look at our neighbors. We have Syria, Iran, Iraq, all difficult neighbors. So it is, and this geography reflects upon our work as well. We have to know everything about Iraq, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan, the Eastern Mediterranean, Russia, Israel, and the European Union, and so forth, which, again, if I may call it as such, puts many things on our plate. And unfortunately, many of those issues are not pleasant issues. You know what, maybe from the news, what Iran is trying to do with its nuclear program. Well, they're in our neighborhood. We don't want nuclear weapons in our neighborhood. So, we have to deal with that. And so it's, our job is, if I may make a comparison, is quite different from a diplomat from Switzerland, for example. Right? Switzerland, look at its neighbors, Germany, Austria, Italy, France, nice neighbors. Which makes our job difficult. So if I may stop here, I can also, because if you don't stop me, I will continue talking for another couple of hours, and it'll be a monologue, and continue talking about Turkey-US relationship or any other issues that concern you. And please feel free to ask me anything. And I really want to underscore this, anything. Don't think that I could be offended or anything. You can ask me something personal as well, professional. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Sinan Bey. You speak so nicely, and it was so easy to listen to you that I mean, if you don't stop, we could just continue listening. But well, so we have a question already. Where's your favorite place you've lived? Mina is asking.
It's thank you, Mina. It's a tough question. Why is it a tough question? Because each country, each city has their own. How should I put it? You know, and, I mean, they're different. You can't compare really one city to another because every city offers something else. My wife and I, we have 4.5-year-old son. So, for example, DC offers much for children. There are very nice museums, Smithsonian museums, for example. There are very nice parks. You know, the education here is very, very, very nice. Schools are very nice. And you can just hop in your car and you can drive to Baltimore, for example, go to the underwater museum, to the aquarium, or you can hop into your car and drive to Ocean City, to the Atlantic Ocean, for example. So it's very nice. It's a green city. Of course, it's very clean. You can find everything in supermarkets. Very nice restaurants. So DC in that respect is very nice. And I talked about Skopje, Macedonia. Macedonia was very nice because it was a smaller city. We had very good friends there from the other embassies. Here in DC, it's a bit different because they're about close to, I mean, every country has an embassy here in DC. So since there are so many foreign diplomats here, nobody really gets to know other diplomats. And in Skopje, it was different. It was a small diplomatic community. We had very good friends. We were very good friends with the US colleagues, German colleagues, French colleagues, Italian colleagues. And it was very close to Greece. So my wife and I, we used to drive to Greece very often, to Thessaloniki, to the beach. We used to go to Athens. We visited the Greek islands. So that's, you know, also very nice, but different from DC. Berlin, and that's the last example I promised I will give you. You know, again, not to bore you, but Berlin is, you know, the capital of Europe, so to speak. You know, it's Germany is in the leading role in the European Union, so you can feel that in Berlin. And since Berlin was destroyed in World War II by the bombings, it has been rebuilt. And Berlin has been reunified in the 1990s, as you know. There was East Berlin and West Berlin, and it was divided by a wall. So you can feel the history there, unpleasant history as well, unfortunately. But you still sense that it was the capital of Germany in World War II, where Hitler was around. You still feel the sense of the division between communism and capitalism. Of the post-World War II area. So that had another character to itself. So again, all cities are different if you ask me, but currently since I live here in DC, I think DC now is my favorite.
Sinan Bey, we have quite a lot of questions. Let me go through these. So Eren Alpa is asking, do you know any other languages besides the three that you mentioned? Zeynep Ajun is asking, as somebody who wants to be a diplomat, what are some of the things I can do in high school to make myself stand out to universities? And maybe I'll stop there and then I'll read more later.
First, I have a question for you. If you don't mind, I will take off my jacket.
Oh, please.
Since I saw Sıtkı Bey also without a jacket, I envied him. So, I mean, good questions. Thank you for that. I mean, the languages I speak, of course, you know, not to brag about it, but I mean, besides Turkish, I spoke about German. My dad was also a diplomat, a Turkish diplomat. So he served twice in Germany, once in Bonn. I talked about East and West Germany. Bonn was the capital of West Germany, where I went to elementary school. Then he was the Turkish consul general in Stuttgart, which is in the south of Germany. And there I went to high school. So my first foreign language is German after Turkish. I learned my English in Germany, actually. So maybe I have a German accent in my English. That could well be, because when I was in high school, I also came to the US, to Indiana, as an exchange student for my last year for my senior year of high school. And you know, my classmates used to make fun of me because of my German accent in my English as a Turk. And you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator, he has a German accent, and they would make me say, "I'll be back." So, you know,
I don't think you have that anymore, though.
maybe. So, I mean, you know, we used to have fun times at the time. So yes, German, English, and I, you know, when I was in high school in Germany, I also had the chance to learn French. But my French is a bit rusty now. And I mean, I can make small talk in French, but you know, if I were to have a full-fledged official meeting with somebody, I don't believe I would understand anything. But if I read something, at least I understand what, you know, what the article is about. So that's more or less it. And you know, coming to the question of what you can do in high school to prepare yourself for you know, for a career as a diplomat, is to learn languages. That will make a difference. You know, I'm sure that many of you know or learn Spanish. That will make a difference. But besides Spanish, I would suggest some other languages as well. Maybe exotic, if I may call them as such, languages as well, such as, I don't know, Chinese, Russian, Greek. I mean, those would make a difference, because many people speak French, Spanish, German, but very few people speak other languages, such as I said, Greek, Arabic. Arabic is quite difficult for us. Chinese, Japanese. We have colleagues in the ministry who speak Japanese, for example. We have colleagues who speak Chinese, and that makes a difference in the entrance exam, because you know, although you know, you don't understand them, when they speak Japanese, you really, you know, you feel respect for them. So learning languages, and learning languages well, will make a difference. And I believe you can start in high school, because it's much easier to learn languages when you're younger, and that's a fact.
Shall I continue with the questions? If you could be the diplomat of any country of your choice, what country would you choose? This is one question. From Sandro Garcia. And I think, Sandro, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are Cuban American Turkish, right? Well, did I get it right? Yeah. So we have interesting mixes among our ambassadors. Then Dila Arat has a question. What got you to start working in foreign policies, and why did you choose it? Then Austin Georges has a question. What is your favorite part about being a diplomat? And I don't know if we answered this question, but Zeynep had a question. I mean, I guess you partially answered it. She said, what I can do in high school to make myself stand out to universities.
Yes, thank you very much. Very good questions indeed. Well, since Sandro, it's a tough choice for you, of course. I mean, You could, do you hold the Turkish nationality as well? Yes. So, well, it's a difficult choice. See, I mean, there's no clear-cut answer for that. I mean, it's a personal choice, first of all. You know how you feel about, your ancestry. But since you live in the U.S. and you're educated in the U.S. system, it would make probably more sense to be a U.S. diplomat. And here in the State Department, there are many colleagues of ours, U.S. diplomats, with different backgrounds, right? I mean, there are colleagues with, backgrounds from Asia, from Middle Eastern countries, all U.S. diplomats, U.S. citizens. So I don't, and do you speak Turkish as well? So see, that's an advantage for you. I mean, as a U.S. diplomat, you would speak Spanish, English, Turkish, and if you learn one more, for example, since you speak Spanish, you could learn Italian, for example, as well. I mean, with 4 languages, that would be a great advantage for you, right? So, I mean, you have to choose. But again, just, due to the fact that you live here, that you go to school here in the States, and you will probably go on to college here in the States, you may want to consider to become a U.S. diplomat. So, if which country would I choose? Well, I had no other choice but to choose Turkey. As I said, but if I had the choice, let's say unlimited choice, there are different things, of course. As I said, being a Turkish diplomat is challenging. Being a diplomat from Norway probably is more relaxing. I'm sure that my Norwegian colleagues here in DC have, a very good time in DC. Not that I do not, but it's difficult to tell. Russian diplomats have it difficult here in the U.S. Chinese diplomats have it difficult here in the U.S. British diplomats, they thrive here in the U.S. since there are very good relations between Great Britain, and the U.S. So it's a tough question to answer. It's a matter of personal preference, I would say. And I know that I probably, I gave you a diplomatic answer in that, right? So coming to the next question, why did I choose to become a diplomat? Well, I told you my dad was also a diplomat. So when I graduated from college, my dad asked me, well, shall I prepare you for the entrance exams to the ministry? And I said, no way, over my dead body. Because I said, I've had enough. I traveled all around the world as a kid, with you. I had to change, numerous schools between countries. I went to school in Turkey, in Germany, in the States. I lived in Libya when I was a child, in former Czechoslovakia when I was a baby. I don't remember that, but so I said, no, I've had enough. I don't want to move anywhere anymore. I want to have a stable life, which lasts only 2 years. Because then, because apparently this is imprinted in me. I have the urge to move around. I do not imagine myself living in a country or in a place or in a house for 20, 25 years. That's a scary thought for me, but that's just me. Again, this is personal. Many other people, I would suppose, would think just the opposite. If I may tell you a very short story, when I first got posted, you make, they tell you there are these vacancies in these embassies abroad in these countries, and you get to make choices, right? You can apply for a job in Georgia, in Ethiopia, I don't know, in China, and so forth. So one colleague told me that she had been living in the same house for 25 years ever since she was born. But when she received the form of vacant positions, she looked at the world map, right? Which, imagine you lived in the same house for 25 years. Now you have the world map in front of you, and you have to make a choice. So again, it's a personal preference. Some people find it scary. Find the thought scary that they have to move around. Some people like me find it scary to be in the same place for 20, 25, maybe 50 years. So that's why I chose the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Plus, I worked in the finance sector for a while after I graduated. That also wasn't for me. Again, it's a personal matter. What's my favorite part of being a diplomat? Again, what I stressed earlier, you get to meet people from all around the world, and you don't necessarily have to live there. So, I have contacts with the Russians here, for example, on a professional basis, but I've never been to Russia. I have good relations with the Greeks here, for example, but I don't necessarily have to go to Greece. I can still enjoy their cultural background here in the US as well, because since I get to talk to them and get to know them. And also the thought of getting to know new places, discovering new places, jumping in the car and driving somewhere I've never been, and maybe will never see again. That really, makes me happy, and that's, I believe, the best part of my job. Plus, there are some, benefits, of being a diplomat, such as you don't have to pay taxes when you're posted abroad. I see a smile on Mina's face when I said I don't pay taxes. You have diplomatic immunity, which means nothing actually. People talk about diplomatic immunity. That only means should you commit a crime, which a normal diplomat wouldn't. The U.S. authorities cannot arrest you; they can just kick you out of the country. Then the Turkish authorities prosecute you. That is diplomatic immunity, which doesn't mean that you have a blank check to walk around, and commit crimes or something. But again, it's you drive a car with a diplomatic license plate, which means nothing again because we still get to pay traffic fines. But at least in principle, it's good to know that should you need something, your country is behind you. Or it supports you, and that you're somewhat protected against the accepting country, which is the U.S. Here in this case. But again, the main and the major reason is to get to know new people and discover new places. That's where I stop again.
Well, now we have more difficult questions coming up. So let's start with the first one. How has the current political tensions in Turkey affected you and your job? This is from Ekin. And then another question from Toprak. Your political leanings, are you allowed to express them at all in your job? I know the answer to that is normally very obvious, but I would love to hear about what you're allowed to say and what you can't. And I have a question, and it is about the US-Turkey relations at the moment. What are some of the biggest challenges? Are the relationships going down, up? Can they be rescued at this point? So what are your perspectives on that? And I stop there.
all mean because you should have asked me the tough questions in the beginning. Now, I'm tired and you now ask me the tough questions.
You can put on your jacket back if you want.
Well, let's start with the easy one. I mean, my political leaning doesn't matter, because whether I'm, whether I have a political view of center right or center left does not matter, because I'm a bureaucrat. So I work for the government. And when you become a public servant, you have to accept the fact that whoever comes to power, in terms, by power I mean the government, you have to do as they say, right? I implement policies. I do not make policies. So my political affiliation or my personal views, I do have my personal views about many things, of course, but I cannot reflect them on my work. So I have to really go with, it's sometimes difficult to, not that, don't misunderstand me, not that I say that I do this, but it may be difficult to, how should I put it, to implement policies where you think that those are not correct, but you still have to do it. So when you are a bureaucrat, again, you have to do this by knowing that you have to implement whatever the government's policies are, irrespective of your personal views. So that was the easy one. The current political tensions in Turkey, how do these affect the US? Well, how do these affect my work? Domestic politics in Turkey does not affect my work at all, because, as I said, I am dependent on the government. I'm a public servant. So whether there is political tension between different parties in Turkey, it doesn't really concern me, because it's the government that tells us what to do, right? So if President Erdogan has a fight with the main opposition leader Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, I don't care, because I receive my orders from the government. Not, by saying I mean all of the foreign service. So current political tensions in Turkey, they do not affect us and will not affect us. And this is not only valid for Turkey. If you become a US diplomat, irrespective of your views, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican, or whether you have other views, you would have to implement the politics of the government, right? So right now, whatever the Trump administration says, the State Department implements, whether they agree with it or not, on a personal basis. Whatever Secretary Pompeo says, the diplomats have to implement it. Again, but this is true for any kind of public service. Even if you work for the Department of Homeland Security, or whether you work in the Turkish Ministry of Health, for example, if you are a public servant, you have to implement the government's policies. That's your duty. So if you want to become a bureaucrat or a public servant, you have to know that this is the case. Again, I worked for a private bank and for a private brokerage company as well. I told you 2 years in the finance sector. It's not much different there as well. Unless you run your own company, you have to do what your boss says, right? That's a matter of fact, and that's a fact of reality, a fact of life, actually. So unless you have your own job, that's how it goes. How U.S.-Turkey relation, what the current status of the U.S.-Turkish relationship is, and the challenges that we face. there are many challenges. This will, be maybe a bit boring for you now, a bit more technical, but there are many challenges on our agenda. First of all, where should I start? I mean, we know we are NATO allies with the US, so we've been a NATO ally for 70 years, which does not mean that we agree on everything. So we see some countries as a common adversary, such as Russia, China, and so forth, but that doesn't mean that we agree on everything. We disagree on many issues when it comes to Syria. We disagree on many issues when it comes to Iran, when it comes to the Southern Caucasus now with the conflict of Armenia and Azerbaijan. We disagree on Eastern Mediterranean issues. We disagree on our military procurement from Russia, for example, and so forth. But these are all challenges that I believe are surmountable. So we can overcome these. Because, in fact, it is my true belief that although we have different views, these are not very substantial. These are only, I will give you an example. I said we have different views when it comes to Iran. We have converging views when it comes to the fact that we don't want nuclear weapons in Iran, because nuclear weapons inevitably would pose a threat to Turkey because they are our neighbor. And the United States doesn't want Iran to obtain nuclear weapons due to the fact that Israel is in the neighborhood, right? I mean, the US wants to preserve the safety of Israel. So we are on the same page, actually, with the US when it comes to Iran trying to obtain nuclear weapons. Where we differ is the means. We believe that dialogue is the way to move forward to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, whereas the current administration exerts maximum pressure, it's called, on Iran by imposing economic sanctions, by pressuring Iran, and so forth. So the means are the things where we differ, because we in Syria we agree. Again, last thing that I will, because I see that you get bored on these issues. Syria, for example, we agree that Syria should be stable, a predictable Syria, where hostilities come to an end because there is an civil war going on in Syria. But again, the means differ in that sense. The US thinks, by supporting what we call them terrorist entities in the north, PKK affiliated, Kurdish affiliated terrorists in the north, is a good way to move forward, whereas we disagree with the US on this. So I believe there are ways to overcome our differences, and these are not to speak and not to recite known arguments, because I know what the US side is going to say about a certain topic, and my US colleagues know what I am going to say. So we need to find constructive ways to move forward and focus on the areas where we agree with the US. This does not mean that the areas where we disagree will disappear by themselves, but at least we can create a positive atmosphere by concentrating on the positive things and then try to solve the negative issues. So I know this is a bit hypothetical and boring, and I'm sorry for that, but just to put it in a nutshell.
No, actually, I thought it was very interesting. But again, that was my question. So we have two more questions here. The first one is from Deniz Seyhan. And you said that your dad was a diplomat, so probably you knew what you were getting into. But he says, what are some of the things you wish you learned before you became a diplomat? If you could share any insights on that. And then Mina has a question. Is there anything you wish you could have done differently during your time as a diplomat? If yes, could you tell us about that experience and what you learned?
It is, it's a it's a different experience. I mean, those are different experiences moving around with your parents as a child or as a teenager, and being a diplomat yourself, because maybe you have the same perception with your parents. You know, what your parents do, you don't really know in details. Okay, my dad is an architect, or my dad is, this, or my mom is this and that, but you don't really know what it entails to be an architect. What an architect does in the office, or out on the field, or anything. So what they do in particular, I couldn't speak, sorry. But I mean, the same is true for me. I knew, we would travel all around. You have to move every couple of years, every 3-4 years. But what it means to really talk to local authorities to protect the interests of your country, or to develop arguments against other arguments, I had no idea. So when I first got posted to Tbilisi, when I was 28 years old, actually, I wasn't that young, I had no idea what I was facing. I had no idea what I was going to do in the embassy, who I was going to meet, what I was going to say, what I was going to say in response to another person when they talked about something. It's a total different issue, moving around with your parents and being a diplomat yourself. So, what I wished I would knew is, well, how it works in detail, but it's difficult finding out. Even now, when somebody asks me, what does a diplomat do? Tough question. We regulate relations between countries. I don't know, what else do we do? Well, what does a diplomat do on a daily basis? Good questions. When I come into the office, what do? Well, I read the press, to report back to Ankara what's happening in domestic politics currently here in the US with the upcoming elections. I make, when I say I mean the whole embassy. We make predictions about who may win the elections, how policies towards Turkey may change if Biden wins, for example, or if Trump gets reelected, or if, how policies will change towards Russia, for example, if Biden wins or something. But what else do I do? Well, see, I mean, it's a tough question. So, would I have wished that to know all of these things? My dad comes into the office in the morning, he does this and that. Probably not. It's better to get to know all of these by yourself. But again, it's a different thing being a child of a diplomat and being a diplomat yourself. Totally different thing. What would I have wished to do differently? I mean, that's a tough question. I mean,
As a diplomat, I guess the question is like, if you can share an experience with us where you learned a lesson and wish you did things differently. And maybe while you are thinking about that, I can read you 2 more questions that we just received. What are specific things you do as a diplomat when it comes to dealing with political tensions in Turkey? This is a question from Dila Bostancı. And the second question is from Selin Sincan. How does the embassy coordinate health policies between the United States and Turkey?
Coming back to the initial question, what would I have done differently? You know, I probably would have wanted to work in a war zone. I mean, that is not a specific, anecdote, but I mean, when I got posted to Tbilisi, to Georgia in 2004, maybe you have heard of the name Eduard Shevardnadze, who was the foreign minister of the Soviet Union and, played a role in the dismemberment of the Soviet Union, was the president of Georgia because he was Georgian, So he was overthrown, and the new president, Mikhail Saakashvili, took power, and I was posted right at the beginning of that term of Saakashvili. So there was turmoil in Georgia. We had to be very vigilant when it came to security issues, because you would have, I mean, it was common crimes were very common. You could have been robbed everywhere on the street. People broke into houses and so forth. It was a difficult posting, but being posted in Baghdad, for example, or in Kabul, in a really war, I mean, in the middle of a war, probably provides a better of understanding of what it means, for a country to suffer. I mean, not this is a good thing. On the contrary, so you appreciate your own situation in the country. So that could have been a good, and it's a challenge. See, I mean, as I said, being a diplomat is a challenge because you have to adapt yourself constantly, learn new things. And I believe that would have been a greater challenge because I personally like challenges. For example, I run half marathons because, not because I want to achieve, I want to be an athlete or something, just, psychologically that I can do this makes me happy. So, a posting in Kabul, for example, would have made me happy just psychologically that I could, that I, just knowing that I can do this. And again, to appreciate what you as a Turkish diplomat have, when you see all of the things happening in that country. So that maybe I could have done differently. Specific things regarding political tensions, and as I said earlier, we honestly don't care what is happening in terms of domestic politics in Turkey, because again, I mean, we implement official government policies. So whether there are political tensions between parties in Turkey doesn't really affect us. The only thing that would affect us is, the HDP in Turkey, the Kurdish party in the parliament. Some members have been jailed in Turkey. Turkey receives criticism due to the fact that some politicians have been imprisoned, and not often, but time to time, we need to explain why that has happened. Or, for example, we need to explain why the Hagia Sophia mosque has been opened, to worship again. Such as those, but really, political parties in Turkey, we honestly don't care what is happening there. In terms of our work, I mean, personally, I do care, of course, but professionally speaking, that doesn't affect us. And how we coordinate health policies between Turkey and the U.S. Well, especially now, of course, I know why you asked this because it's a hot issue now. We report back to Ankara every day, but really on a daily basis, including Saturdays, except Sundays, what is happening here in the U.S. in terms of what the numbers are, cases, deaths, unfortunately, what those are, what the U.S. is implementing, what policies the U.S. is implementing to overcome this pandemic. And I believe, our people in Turkey, they really pay close attention to what the U.S. administration is doing in this respect, because the most cases in the world are here in the U.S. So it really, I believe, would affect policymaking in Turkey as well. Certainly, the U.S. has passed, the U.S. Congress has passed, many bills to support businesses in the trillions. We don't have that financial capability, but we do similar things on a much smaller scale. And furthermore, I believe it was in April, we provided the U.S. with personal protective equipment, PPEs, because at the outset there was much need for PPEs here in the U.S., such as masks, gowns, face shields, gloves, and so forth. And we had readily produced equipment in Turkey, which we flew to the U.S. And I believe we overall we provided, I think, 500,000 of masks, many more gowns and so forth. And so just to show our that we stand with our U.S. allies, in the time of need, and it was much appreciated. And also, many other private institutions donated masks to the U.S., which also made a difference, I believe. So, I mean, coordinating efforts is rather. I mean, we talk about the global. What can be done on a global scale against the pandemic, but bilaterally, this is what we do in terms of health policies currently.
Sinan Bey, while we're on the health issue, just a quick follow-up in terms of once the vaccine is developed and produced, or vaccines, let's say, do we have agreements with the U.S. government to make sure these are also provided in Turkey or disseminated in Turkey? I mean, who deals with these issues? Is that a part of the embassy's mandate?
Thanks for the question. Well, actually, this is, the vaccine candidates. Do you hear me now? Oh, sorry. Okay. So, as Sıtkı Bey said, I should start slowly and then, say what I have to say. The vaccine candidates are produced by private companies. It's not the U.S. government that produces these. And as you know, the U.S. government also buys these. The U.S. government has allocated quite a substantial amount of budget to buy these vaccines. And actually, they're in the process of producing vaccines that are in the final trial stage, just to be ready if the trials go well. Otherwise, they will dump all of these produced vaccines. Well, the same is true for Turkey. We would have to buy those vaccines of Johnson & Johnson, for example, or other companies. It's a financial issue. I mean, these companies do not produce these vaccines as a charity. So it is a financial issue. And I believe, for example, the UK, I read a few months ago, has already pledged to buy, I don't remember how many doses of vaccines from a company. I don't recall the name, but also some other countries. So the same is true for us. I believe Ankara is currently watching closely who is ahead in this race and who will have the better vaccine. And Ankara did ask us about, what the companies are doing specifically and at what stage the companies are, with what countries the specific companies here have already made an agreement with, but we have not signed any agreement so far with a company here in the US. And I believe our government is currently watching the process in that sense. But as soon as a vaccine is readily available, I'm sure that our government will also be in line to buy, you know, a few million doses, I would think.
Wow, fascinating topics. So I think that's the end of our questions, and we've come to the end of the time that's allocated to today's program. I guess I'll ask everyone if they have one last question. But we have taken so much of your time. Sinan Bey, thank you so much for your frank answers and openness. We really appreciated this conversation. And I'm sure some of our young cultural ambassadors are already thinking about developing a career in foreign policy and foreign affairs. So I think they are readier. They've become more ready after this conversation today. So thank you so much. And there are thank yous.
If I may, I would also
They
like
say great meeting. Thank you. And thank you so much, Sinan Bey, again, from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you, Demet Hanım, for organizing this, first of all, and Sıtkı Bey. Again, this was, I mean, you made my day, honestly. After a long, hard day, I will go home with a smile on my face, honestly speaking. Thank you very much for this. And thank you to all of you. Should you have any questions, again, I mean, you saw that I'm trying to be frank and open as, you know, to the extent that I can. You can always send us emails to the embassy. Just Google us, you'll find our email address. You can follow us on, you know, social media. We have accounts everywhere. You know, also in the future, should you have any questions, comments, please do not hesitate to contact us. And then, you know, I'm being frank in this.
Thank you very much Sinan Bey. Çok çok teşekkür ederiz.
Biz teşekkür ederiz. Herkese iyi akşamlar. Görüşmek üzere. Kendinize iyi bakın.
Thank you, Sinan Bey. And hopefully we can come and visit you in person.
Yes, hopefully we'll do it in person next year.
Yes, let's do that.
All right. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your hard work and everything that you do.
Thank you
for our country.
Thank you. Bye bye. İyi akşamlar. Görüşmek üzere.
İyi akşamlar. Teşekkürler. Sağ olun.